Okay. With that said, we'll go ahead and get this January 24th council briefing going. It's 5:30 on Monday evening. We do have 3 topics that we'd like to discuss with council this evening. The first item that we would like to talk about is the one that was brought up at the last city council meeting, which is regarding remote participation in council meetings. You should have all received an email earlier in the day that contains some Councilmember Stokes had reached out with a handful of questions, and based on the questions that he was asking, we felt it would be important to have that information in the hands of all the different council members. You also have a draft resolution that was put together by the city attorney. We've tried to supply you with some other information regarding what other communities are doing for virtual participation in meetings, either by their council or by their boards. For this particular item, we're looking to receive some direction as to how you would like us to move forward, if at all, with regards to development of a policy for remote participation. City attorney, well, she's the one who drafted the attachment that you have to the memo for discussion. She's also done some of the research with her legal assistant to find out what the other organizations around the state of Florida are doing. So with that, I'll open it up to any conversation or discussion or questions that you may have of the staff to get this ball rolling. And firsthand is Councilmember Mesa.
Yes. I just want to say that if a council member can't attend the meeting for unforeseen reasons, I personally don't see a problem if it's virtual. We do right now, we're doing in-person meetings, library board, committee boards, and if you can't attend because you have something going on health-wise or something else, you could attend the meeting by a Zoom and you can still vote on it. So those are just my 2 cents, and I'll just wait to see what my colleagues say.
Mayor Hoffman.
When things were shut down during quarantine, I felt like we couldn't have the Board of Adjustment meetings because of the nature of their votes. Are there any, is it quasi-judicial or quasi-legislative? Are there any restrictions on the types of votes that can be taken remotely? Because I know that was something that held, I think it was the Board of Adjustment that was held up. Can somebody refresh my memory?
Yeah, this was an issue that was a lot of communities were struggling with, were votes that dealt with quasi-judicial decision-making of either an appointed board or the city council itself. Out of an abundance of caution, there were a lot of jurisdictions that were deferring quasi-judicial actions, specifically because quasi-judicial is seeking input from the public. There was a concern that members of the public would not have been able to participate in a virtual fashion. That's a little different in terms of what we're talking about, where we're talking about the actual board members not being in the actual room where the physical quorum is being held. So this isn't anything that I think is, I don't think this is going to be the same type of an issue that the boards face, but you are correct. We did have the, I believe, Planning Commission, as well as the City Council, where we were trying to defer quasi-judicial actions as most we could. And Sandy, okay, you want to weigh in on that? I know you weren't here at the time, but maybe you had similar recourse up in Virginia.
Yeah, that's right. For quasi-judicial, what the legislature included in our enabling statutes was some permission to defer those proceedings so that the time limits would not count against the applicants. So everything was suspended without any harm to the applicant until such time as those meetings could be convened in person. As time went on, however, more authority was granted by the state so that the applicant could place his application before the body, his request before the body, and testimony could be taken electronically. So there was an evolution, but initially the way the state dealt with it was to give us permission to defer those applications without there being any harm to the applicant or adversely affecting the locality, because in some instances, if a decision wasn't made within a certain period of time, it was an affirmative decision for the applicant. So those things helped us a lot deal with those issues. But as I stated, it was an evolved process rather than one that was a perfect fit right out of the gate.
Thank you. And I like that we're looking at this, and I do support it. And I think it's interesting, or I guess it's good that it has the quorum is required to be in person. So I guess that's the big difference between a fully virtual quasi judicial action versus just one person is virtual. So thank you for clarifying.
Councilor Nichols?
So I've got some major concerns with it for numerous reasons. You know, how do we determine what, if it's an illness? I mean, you know, or what the situation is. Do we need to see a doctor's note from the person if somebody's traveling and can't make it? You know, what's going to end up qualifying for this? My concern, if it's a health matter, that we might have some HIPAA problems that we're running into if we're asking them to prove that they're sick. You know, I think that if it happens once or twice, but obviously our first attempt did not go very smoothly. Not being there, you can't light your light to show that you want to speak. It just doesn't, it makes the meeting not flow as it should. I also think that if you're on council and you're voting, you should, if the residents are there, you should have to look them in the eye and vote accordingly. I mean, I don't have a problem with somebody. I don't know where I am on somebody making comments during a council meeting without voting. I just think the whole thing is not a good idea, and we're opening a can of worms. If you have multiple people out, then you're going to have to figure out a way through a conference call and figure out there's just a lot of details that's going to cause problems. With that, I just don't think it's a good idea. If we do go down this, you know, maybe one meeting or something, I guess we can, or maybe two, but I definitely would not go any further than that, because you might get somebody that has on, you know, a chronic illness that, you know, they're in the hospital, and are they there for a year remotely and never have to face the public? I mean, I just have a lot of questions that I don't really have answers to. And I had a couple more. Let me but those were some of the other ones. If I think of a few of the other ones, I will definitely let you know. But I really just don't think it's a good idea. And then also, you know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on at a national level about voting remotely, and if people have to show up and vote, I think we should have to show up and vote as well. So I'm against it, and I think we should. We need to move forward. I think if somebody can attend, that we need to potentially, like the city of Jacksonville, that they need to ask for excused absences or something, that they need to, that there's a lot more that we need to do on this subject, but I think we're going down a path that could really cause us some problems. Thank you.
Councilor Jansen.
So I kind of have some of the concerns that that Corey has. One of them that he brought up was the duration. And in the draft that was presented to us, it doesn't address that at all. I did some research on my own, and I found one municipal code that was written for the I guess it's the city or town of Mount Lake Terrace, Washington. And theirs was well done, I think, because it talks about remote attendance under emergent circumstances, and they address duration. I found one municipal code that was written for the. That was weird, and so it's pretty in depth in their code. I can share it with you, Mike, and then you can send it to the rest of the council members. Also, I guess we have to have consideration if it is a health issue. Is the individual under any kind of influence of a narcotic of any sort? And if they are, do they have the wherewithal to say, hey, listen, I probably shouldn't attend this meeting if I'm under some kind of medication or something to that effect? There's, I think about it in terms of my prior employment. If you're not able to attend, you have to provide a reason to the employer as to why you can't be there. And these are some of the issues that are going to come up with something like that. I do think that attendance remotely is a good thing under the right circumstances. Like COVID was a perfect example. I mean, we didn't have much of a choice then. And there may be examples where we don't have much of a choice, but I think this draft is lacking in several areas when it comes to something like that. When it comes to accountability.
Councilor Meza?
I can see why my colleagues have the concerns, but I'm looking at number 6 on the draft, and it lays out the type of excuses you're allowed to use. Now, when I go out of town, I plan my trips around the council meetings. I personally don't want to miss any of the council meetings. So I try to do them when there's a briefing, because I could do it remotely and it's very convenient. Now, if I was to go out of town and let's say there's a council meeting and I'm missing out, I could say, Mike, Mayor, I'm not going to be there. Can I participate remotely? And I think this is where council will agree, say, yes, you can, or no, you can't. Now, if I was sick, obviously, let's say, God forbid, I have cancer and I'm going through chemo treatment and I have to miss a couple, then this is where I would like to participate remotely. But on number 6 on the drafts, I think those are pretty legit excuses. If someone's out of town, then I guess it's either on them or on us to agree if we allow the council member or the mayor to participate remotely. Thank you.
Councilor Nichols?
Yeah, I think we're also getting into a situation where if the council's going to have to approve that person that their excuse is acceptable, that it could potentially bias some votes, that could potentially be a problem. But, we were able to do this because there was a state of emergency for COVID. We all did it. I think there's just going to be too many technical issues if you have some people there and then some people not there. If you have 3 people absent trying to do it remotely, it isn't going to work. It's going to be a disaster. So, with that said, I continue to just think it's not a good idea.
Councilor Jansen?
Yeah. So also in this code that's presented by Mount Lake Terrace, they talk about anybody that under emergent circumstances, anyone that attends remotely, they have a whole list of, or when I say a whole list, they got 4 items, and 2 of the items which are of concern for me is that the member already is able to receive electronic or otherwise materials while they're attending remotely. That way, if there's an email or something that has to be presented, that the person that's missing can receive that email. Also, they require you to have attendance in person, whether it's Zoom, FaceTime, Skype, whatever it is, in case exhibits are presented. If someone brings an exhibit up to the council and says, hands it down to diocese, the person that's remote would either have to be able to see it or not participate in a vote on something that without being able to see all the exhibits.
Councilor Dumont.
I understand a lot of the concerns, but I think technology alleviates some of them, like the one that Mr. Jansen just noted, that it's relatively easy to note any of the new information that's presented to council on the dais. With regard to getting information that council members aren't getting because you're remote, I'm far less concerned with that. And part of that is the instances would be relatively rare. I'm okay with this amendment, with this policy, as long as we are really looking at, does the individual who cannot attend have a medical issue, is not able to attend for a reasonable health concern? And the other ones, I really liked how Neptune Beach framed their criteria. So I would agree with a criteria that says if I'm out of town because I have to go to a conference for work, I shouldn't be able to attend remotely. And I'm perfectly fine with that. It's not I have the option to not attend a conference or attend a council meeting. And I make that decision which one I'm going to choose. But if one is deciding to not attend a council meeting because of a specific issue, and that would be health, then I would hope that we would have grace enough to understand that an individual who's not attending because of a health issue truly is not attending because of a health issue, but still wants to participate because this individual still has a lot to contribute to the conversation. So when we look at whether individuals should be able to participate remotely or not participate remotely, we should be looking at it not at the convenience of the individual, but as what our jobs are, and it's to represent our constituents. And we want to be able to represent our constituents, and our constituents want us to be able to represent them through whatever means is possible. So I am in support of this. I don't think it's a slippery slope. I don't, and we have a very, some of the framework here is very restricted. So it's because I'm not going to sit home and watch the Stanley Cup or the playoffs. So, I can't make the council briefing. So, sorry, I will participate remotely, and I'm logged in and I'm watching the hockey game. That is not what this is for. This is for something that I truly cannot be, for a health reason, I cannot be in the chambers at the time for the meetings. So I am in agreement with with letting people to participate remotely within a restricted criteria.
Councilor Stokes.
Well, I want to thank Mike and Sandy and the city clerk for answering my long list of questions ahead of time. And thank you for providing those. I asked most of them early. So two things that I want to bring up. I'm against 6A, physical or mental impact due to arising from COVID. It is if they have a mental impact from COVID, they probably shouldn't be voting. A mental impact probably is not a good idea to have somebody, any sort of mental impact. Probably don't want that person voting. And I just think that you're getting a little bit too specific on COVID-19. This is supposed to be like a long reaching document, right? It's not it's going to be, it's an ordinance, I think, right? It's an ordinance. So it's going to be in our codes for a while. I don't think we need to specifically cite COVID-19. I think that a health related matter covers that. And I noticed not everyone covered COVID-19 specifically. I think health related is close. So here's a thought, and it kind of is my idea to bring both ideas. Is it possible to allow attendance at the meeting remotely, but the person just isn't able to vote? They're a non-voting member in attendance. I don't know, but to me that somewhat solves the issues that I'm hearing of that person voting, but then they're also in attendance, so they're getting to absorb the knowledge. When I had COVID, I was on the briefing, but I didn't speak up just because my screen was black, and honestly, I wasn't feeling great. I didn't think that I should be speaking up because I was suffering those mental impacts of COVID. So that's maybe my idea is if you got a very health related matter or something like this, you can still be a part of the body, but maybe not a voting part of the body. I don't know if that's allowable. I didn't see anything in our charter about it. I didn't see anything in our codes about it. So that would be my thought, to make it both. If you got a health emergency, you can still be a part of the thing and still attend, but maybe while your health emergency is going on, while you can't be physically present, you can't vote. That's just a thought. I don't know.
Councilor Nichols?
Got you. Hey, sorry. I was just going through a couple of these. So, if you're looking at 6A, mental impacts are very hard to define. If somebody just doesn't want to be in public, I disagree with Councilor Dumont that our residents want people in attendance. I mean, that they just want us, no matter what, to be able to participate. I think if you asked a lot of residents, their expectation is that we show up in person. B, health related matters or issues. A lot of people are utilizing health related matters to obtain medical marijuana licenses, other stuff is anxiety, there's got to be, you could come up with many health related issues. D, where it says family or personal matter or issue requiring a member's full attention. If the member is giving their full attention to a family or personal matter, that's their full attention. They're not giving the proper attention to necessarily to their council responsibilities. So that's all I have right now.
Councilor Dumont?
Thank you. I think well, from what I know of the council, and this may be not fully accurate, I have had the most medical and surgical issues among all of us. So how I look at this is there have been times where I could not be in an environment where I could be exposed to communicable diseases because I needed to have a future treatment. And that in itself is not finite. So I just have to get through a certain specific period to be able to get through my treatment to be able to then carry on with life. And so now I get to hang out with you guys. So I think what we're really looking at is what should be the framework and the time span for what we allow remote participation. So it's not that it should not be allowed at all, but under what circumstances should we be able to allow for people who the voters have decided that they want that individual to represent them? Is it 2 council meetings? Is it 3 council meetings? Is it X number of briefings? We know of times when council members have missed numerous meetings, never mind briefings, during their term of service with no repercussions. And the remote access allows the participation that really adds to the conversation. We want to have more voices versus less voices. And I'm saying this again as the person on this council who has probably had the most in medical bills of anyone here. I think we need to be careful with regard to how we want to exclude or include participation, because participation doesn't necessarily mean mental. It could just be you can't be in an environment where germs are floating around, because that will slow down the ability for you to get a treatment that you need in the future. So you need to take 2-3 weeks away from that kind of environment. I think a lot of people who have had medical issues in their lives are very open and understanding to that kind of an allowance.
Councilor Jansen?
Well, I think you're kind of making my point from the very beginning that there's no duration that was put on there whatsoever. And you can't just say that, well, I'm afraid I might get COVID, so I think what I'll do is I'll be remote for the rest of my term. I think there needs to be a framework in place, and that was the point I was making earlier. And also, when I look at something like 6B, health-related matter or issue, that's too ambiguous for me. I think it needs to be a little bit more defined than that. Now, I don't know what the actual language should be. That's probably more for Ms. Robinson than me, but should it be serious health-related matter? Or should it be, rewritten in a different form? We all have obligations to our careers, whether it's city councilor or you're an officer, you're a teacher. My wife can't say, well, I'm afraid I might get COVID, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to teach the class remotely. She can't do that. She has to be in front of those kids. Same with officers. They don't have the option as a first responder to say, I think I'll just work remotely today. The framework, I think there needs to be a framework. I think we should address remote appearances. Again, I think it needs to be emergent circumstances. And then, of course, the question begs is who makes that determination? Is it the city manager and the mayor, or a combination thereof, or is it brought in front of the council? And then you're back to what Councilor Nichols said, you're dealing with HIPAA matters. I know at JSO, if you had an issue health-wise that prevented you from doing your job, you had to present that to somebody in order for you to get the exception not to do your job. I know with Duval County Schools, if you got COVID and you want COVID leave, you got to prove that you have COVID. You have to provide that test. So, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on this draft.
Councilor Nichols?
Yes, and what Councilmember Dumont, the way she stated is, I have absolutely no doubt that she would put every effort into attending meeting if she felt she was capable of being there. That, no question about that. But we're making decisions based on all council members going forward. And if you look in the past, There's been people that have missed substantial amounts of meetings, not on this group, not recently, 7, 8 years ago. I'd be concerned about, I'm leaning towards if I was going to approve this, or it would be, more along the lines of 2 meetings maximum in a row. Now, the other thing that Councilmember Dumont brought up was being able to see things with remote access. So obviously the remote access that we utilized at the previous meeting was through a conference call that was voice only. And I think that would cause some problems, because if somebody did present schematics in the meetings, that person would not necessarily be able to see certain presentations. I think that's something that we would need to define, that if it's going to be on a conference call, how we're going to do it. If we're going to do it as a virtual meeting where some people are there, some people are not, I think that's going to get challenging. But I would lean towards coming up with a way to do it virtually, as opposed to just through voice only. Thanks.
Councilor Meza?
Question for our city attorney. So let's say we were to move forward with this and it gets approved and we vote on it. Let's say I have the flu or I have strep. Am I allowed to participate remotely and vote because I have strep, and obviously it's contagious and flu's contagious? Is this allowed under this draft? I'm just trying to make things clear.
Yes, sir. I would consider that a health issue. And so under provision 6B, if you chose to participate and vote remotely, I would point to that section as your authorization. I think there are a lot of great points that have been made here, and there is a lot of room where the resolution can be changed and improved. But I'd like to bring your attention to the provisions that really sort of, they exist in my draft, they exist in the Neptune resolution, but this part could easily change and give you all a little bit more control over those circumstances under which you permit the participation from a remote location. So in both of these drafts, by going through and defining what extraordinary circumstances mean, the purpose that was intended to be achieved was to provide this automatic approval, to get council away from having to take the reason that you give, hold it up, and consider whether or not it's valid. So if you take the resolutions right as they're currently drafted, in some ways, as long as a member identifies one of these categories, the approval should be automatic. If you don't want that to happen and you want to evaluate the quality of the information that's being provided to you, then that language needs to be taken away. Now, there has been some references to limitations and some other concerns. That was the purpose of this discussion, I think, to utilize these drafts as a starting point for discussion. The reason I provided the Virginia statute is some of the concerns that were discussed here are resolved in some ways by that statute. There's a limitation on the number of meetings in any calendar year that you can use it. There is a approval process of sorts, and the approval process is like either through the chair or through the mayor rather than through the city manager. And a couple other things that are required by that statute that may actually impact the concerns that you have of the privilege being abused are these two things. First of all, there's a requirement that the person who wants to participate remotely there's a requirement that that person has to identify on the record in the meeting why they cannot attend the meeting in person. And then they have to tell on the record where they're participating from. So if we presume that everybody's operating under some kind of honor system, I think the chances of someone deciding to call in to participate remotely because they want to watch the game go down significantly, because they're going to be subjecting themselves to not only, you know, the ire of their constituents, but also maybe the condemnation of their colleagues. So there are a lot of ways that the concerns can be addressed. I think that in fairness to, if we're looking at this as a document to have prospective value to the body, to simply limit your the opportunity to participate to when there's an illness may be a little bit short-sighted, and there may be ways to walk around the other conditions that you think might open the door. For instance, I'm going to pull up on the screen share some provisions from other localities. So at the top of this, like above this line here, are Florida localities that have in place similar policies already. And some
There's
of them—
no share screen happening right now.
Okay, let's try this again.
Let me know if you need me to do it, Sandy.
I'm going to try to do this myself. Can you see it now?
Wrong screen. We got Zoom apps.
Okay, why don't you pick it up for me if you don't mind then?
Oh, there you go. You got it.
Okay, so if you look at where my cursor is, the localities above that line are Florida localities.
Is there a way to zoom in?
Yeah, you can crop off.
Yeah, just zoom in on the lower right. You can see 100%. You want to zoom in more, and then just make sure you scroll over to the left.
You tell me if you have enough.
Keep going.
Let's go.
Need a little bit more.
Yeah. I started going the wrong way.
Ooh.
I know. Sorry about that. All right, can you see it more clearly now, perhaps?
Keep going. On the plus. Just focus on the plus in the lower right.
Mike, can you take over for me on that one? Because I'm having a hard time magnifying this. But in any case, folks, let me just keep going until Mike shows me how to do this. If you look at the localities above that line, those are Florida localities. Many of them adopted these policies well before COVID. They provide for not only for illnesses or medical conditions to be the basis for your request, but it also provides for other kinds of emergencies. A way of dealing with anything that could be something other than illness related is what Naples is doing, which is for good cause shown. Below that line are other localities from around the country that have similar provisions in place for their members. The challenge with a for cause determination, for good cause determination, will require the city council most likely to engage in a public consideration as to a member's condition. And if it's not obviously health related or not seriously a serious medical condition, if you decided to use that criterion, then you have all sorts of privacy issues that we're sort of trying to navigate in a public meeting. And it also operates to sort of substitute the body's judgment from the members' own judgment as to whether or not it's feasible for them to be physically present to participate in the meeting. So those are things to keep in mind. There was a question as to whether you could limit the participation to just that, participation by way of discussion and not voting. Certainly there's some flexibility that you have in outlining the conditions that you want to place on a member if you decide to go this way. The challenge that presents itself in some ways is the challenge because there's no law that controls this particular circumstance. There was a request for legal opinions that addressed it. There are none. Case law, I mean, in that sense. There are AG opinions which address this issue, but all of those AG opinions relied heavily on the analysis of former AGs. They all recognize that their determinations, if you will, are based on their interpretation of what constitutes an open meeting, which is not completely defined by our Florida statute. And it is, in essence, a different legal issue presented than simply a question as to whether or not the sunshine would be violated. So everyone has made their best effort to address a situation which under home rule appears to be something that a member can exercise without regard to whether there exists a formal policy or not. So when we say, can we limit the resolution and the effects of it to just participation and not voting, I think that will go to how far your member wants to press the issue as to whether or not their rights are being interrupted by having access in one way but not full access. And certainly the value of our arguments might be looked at in terms of the impact on transacting the public business, especially if there remains the condition that a physical quorum is present in the meeting place. So those are things to think about. Buried in some of those comments are ways to address some of the concerns that you have. You do have the opportunity to put as many limits on this as possible. I did have an opportunity to speak with the city attorney in Neptune Beach before coming before you all this evening. And, you know, in hindsight, he thinks that maybe their resolution would have been better served with a few more procedural hoops before exercising the privilege to participate remotely. But in that instance, he said many of the concerns that you all have addressed, they too had addressed them in some form or fashion and decided that it was better for them not to have those procedural requirements in place before approval was granted. And so I'm happy to answer any questions, but there are ways to kind of address the concerns that have been shared if there is collectively a desire to sort of see another iteration of a policy. And that's it for what I have at this point. I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, and then on the family or personal matter, obviously, God forbid any one of us on the dais has to deal with a personal loss. I'm assuming that's excused as well. For example, my family's in California. I have to go and, let's say, to a funeral. I'm missing a council meeting, an important council meeting. That would be a good excuse for me to participate remotely, correct?
Right. And
okay.
And that's come up. I tell you, that language comes primarily from an experience where a special meeting was called when a member was on vacation across the country. It was a very important vote, and she wanted to participate in that meeting. And so, you know, when there are regular meetings that are disclosed and published at the beginning of the year, this is less likely to be a consideration or a problem. We're trying to look at incidents which might not be immediately foreseeable, such as a special meeting. And maybe the way we address that, instead of having the language that you're simply physically located at a place that makes your appearance improbable or impossible, you could actually state for special meetings called under short notice or something to that effect. So there are a number of ways we can address this, but to your point, there might be a time when you have to travel for a distance, and it falls along the time of a regularly scheduled meeting, and you would just prefer to participate away from the dais as opposed to returning back to participate. So, it's just trying to figure out not only the needs of this present body, but potentially the needs of future members, when their personalities, maybe their values are completely different. And I guess that brings me to the last point that I wanted to bring up. This is a resolution. It's not an ordinance. You can repeal it or rescind it at any time. It won't have to go through nearly the approval process one way or the other. So there's some flexibility if you even wanted to just try it out for a short period of time to see how it worked. And if you saw that it was being abused, just rescind it or repeal it.
Okay, and I know, but one last thing, I know I agree with Corey. I think this body here is not going to miss any meetings just because they want to go watch the hockey game. I think we're all pretty responsible and we take pride in being part of this body. But I know in the past, way before, council members missed with any excuses. So I think Corey is probably making sure that this is not abused in the future, and whoever's elected as mayor or council member. So, but I think this resolution being flexible, I'm okay with it. So that's it. Thank you.
Mayor Hoffman?
Just really quickly, and thank you for clarifying the process. Seemed like there was some confusion that it really is up to the council member to determine that they fit into those criteria. But I think that also may be causing some of the hesitation, is that it doesn't really give the body an opportunity to kind of control if it's being abused or what have you. And I wonder if there isn't some an opportunity to add to our legislative policy manual, which doesn't speak to attendance at all, other than the attendance, or at least not that I can find, other than the attendance of the city manager and the city clerk to our meetings. So maybe that accountability, and not just remote meeting, but even just attendance in general, to set that expectation. I don't know what the enforcement mechanism would be, but at least we've put the expectation out there of what attendance would be. So I continue to support this. I think it is framed very well that somebody would really need to use it to take the opportunity to use it.
Councilor Nichols?
Thank you. A couple of my other concerns is I don't like the way 6B is written. I think it can be interpreted multiple ways. I would think you would just leave it at health related matter, because if you do or issue, then that issue doesn't necessarily reflect back to health related. So I would just get rid of or issue in that. I don't believe that we have not approved this yet, and I was very hesitant about voting remotely in our previous council meeting, but I do not think until this passes by council that a member should be able to vote until this passes. So I don't think that if this comes up at the next meeting, that if somebody's not in attendance for a reason, they should be able to vote on this issue. And the last thing is, if there might be a particular issue that a council member finds that is very important to them, that they find that they want to vote on. So if they're sick or they have issues and they've missed a few, and they decide, okay, well, I want to attend this one, are they just going to be able to request to attend one meeting? Or is it They've got to be at all of them. So like I said, I just think we're opening up to a lot of problems.
Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. I appreciate a lot of the concerns that have been voiced tonight, and I can see where you're coming from, but I also think that people who serve the public do so for the underlying purpose of promoting the public good. And so with having council all decide whether something is a medical issue, I think that really does start to get into privacy issues as to why someone may need to be excused from a meeting or two. I am more than comfortable with having the city manager determine if the reasoning falls within the policy that we'd be passing. We rely on the city manager a lot to decide as to what is or is not within the boundaries. So I think this is one of those areas that we should really rely on the city manager's decision and to whether he or she knows what the circumstances are. As Ms. Robinson noted, it's a resolution. It's not ordinance, so we can try this out to figure out if it works or if it doesn't work and all of that. I'm trying to read my... I'm also in agreement with having policy attendance added to our council policies. You know, you should show up X amount of times in this amount of row, like, you know, you can't miss more than 2 or 3 meetings without a viable excuse. And that viable excuse, again, shouldn't have to be decided by council. It should be decided by the city manager. You know, we rely on that position to make a lot of these decisions for us, and it should not, we shouldn't start deciding when do we get into the weeds versus when the city manager gets into the weeds. This is a tricky, it's as Australians would say, this is a sticky wicket. I guess Britons would say it as well. This is a sticky wicket, and if you know anything about cricket, which I don't, apparently it's a thing. Just a term that gets tossed around the house a lot. And so where do we really want to draw the lines? And so once you get to a position where you are a voted representative of the public, you've gone through all of the hurdles and all of that stuff, one would expect that there is a level of honesty and commitment that you hold. And if you are not able to attend a meeting, it shouldn't be because I've got a hot date that night kind of a situation. It should be something of substance. And I think at our level of service, one should be able to just assume that if an individual is not able to attend within a framework, that it is it's an important reason why they can't attend, and it's not just because they just don't feel like going, my hair didn't come out right or whatever. It's a weighty issue, and we shouldn't be questioning that, as they also are honorable colleagues of our body.
Councilor Jansen.
So I'm hearing you echo some of the points I made earlier, that even as a sworn law enforcement officer who makes decisions on life and death situations, there's accountability there still for that individual. And I like your thought process, and probably it should be vetted by the city manager. At least there's some accountability there, and it's not just willy-nilly out there. And yes, I would expect everybody that's on the honor system doing the right thing. that's in a perfect world, but not everybody does the right thing 100% of the time. I mean, officers get arrested, teachers get arrested, even politicians get arrested. So I think if we add that element in there where the city manager vets the reason, that I would like to see that in there. Let's just say that. Also, I think Councilor Stokes inadvertently made a great example. He had COVID. He was at the briefing. He wanted to stay off video because he was in dire condition. And I don't know if he had been taking 2 doses of NyQuil or not. I think that if you've got a health issue to any extent that you're taking some kind of medication, now the question comes, are you a voting member? I don't care if you attend remotely, but now are you making votes? I tend to lean towards, if you're under the influence of any kind of medication to that extent, you probably shouldn't be voting. I don't mind that you attend and listen and maybe even participate with your opinion, but I just don't think that you should be a voting member at that point.
Let's do the last comment from Mayor Hoffman, and then I think we're going to be moving on to the next item, only because we still have 2 more weighty items to go. I think we've heard quite a few comments for Sandy and I to put our heads together and come back with something that's a little different and better based on what you've all said. So with that, Mayor, I'll have the final word.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment. I don't agree that someone should get to participate in the debate and then not vote. If someone has a conflict of interest and can't vote, they also cannot participate in the discussion. So I don't think they should have the benefit of weighing in without also the obligation for the vote. One thing that's kind of been nagging on me is the in 6 that shall be constituted by but not limited to any one of the following. Am I reading that correctly, that kind of opens the door, that it's not limited to A through E? Okay, I think it should be limited, and I think that's what we're definitely hearing at this point. Why would we not limit it? And you don't have to answer that now since we've been talking about this for an hour. It'd be great to move on. But in terms of our next council meeting, we were told that there was nothing prohibiting remote participation. So at this point, what we're trying to do is put some guidelines around remote participation. But at this point, there is nothing that prohibits remote participation, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, it's A through G, not A through E. Scroll down to page 3. It continues onto that page.
Did everybody know what I meant? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with that, City Attorney Robinson and I will put our heads together. We'll take into account everything we've heard tonight and come back to you with a revised version to take a look at and consider. Now moving on.
Mike, can I just have clarification that on Monday, is it Monday? Oh, there's a holiday coming up and everything gets shifted. On the next city council meeting, whenever that is, Ms. Golding would be able to vote regardless of whether this is addressed or not.
As the mayor just indicated, there's currently no policies in effect. They're prohibit, include, endorse, whatever, the virtual participation of any member from council, which means as long as there's a quorum in person, we can conduct a meeting. If anyone has a need, I guess to some extent, I'm using some subjectivity on my part as to whether or not they've got a valid reason for participation from a virtual perspective, but that would be the intention, would be to have any council member that needs virtual attendance at the next meeting to be able to do so.
Thank you.
At the next meeting, Mayor Hoffman is not going to be in attendance. Would she be able to run that meeting remotely?
I'm not available to run that meeting remotely, so I'm not requesting that authorization at this time.
Jenny wanted to say hi, get everybody's spirits up after the the big debate.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn the mouse and the driving over to our Parks and Recreation staff. They have 2 items that they'd like to talk to you about tonight. Park signs and rebranding and urban trails update. And Molly, which one do you guys want to do first?
If we could start with park signs, that would be great.
Absolutely. So we'll let you start running with it. It's all yours.
Okay. Just before I get started, I want to let you all know that Jason's here with me. So if you have any questions that you need to direct towards him, he is here. So that being said, I've got 2 topics within the park signs to discuss with you tonight. One being the park signs and the other being the welcome sign at the south side of the city. The park signs are in need of renovation. It's been about 5 years. They've got some age and some wear on them, and we see this as an opportunity to potentially change them. Currently, they're green with the city seal. We just want direction potentially to change them to the logo that's also on the water tower, or if City Council has other suggestions, we're open to that as well.
Councilor Meza.
I am so glad you guys are doing this because I have thought about this for a very long time with the signs. With the 2 new designs you guys have, one with the pink jacks and the white background. I like that background. The other one where it's just the teal and white, I like that background. Maybe you could add the jacks to the same color as pink. For the south end welcome, I love it. I feel like something's missing. I don't know what it is. I'm glad we're doing this. For the Jack's Beach on the welcome sign on the south end, I feel like there's something missing. I don't know what it is, but it's in the right direction. Thank you.
I can't see who's next.
I'm next. So I also like the water tower logo. I think it's fantastic. I think we should update that to reflect that, the signs to reflect that. The only concern I have that I've seen over time, I might have mentioned it in a briefing a year ago or so, is I'd like to see better lighting on the signs at night. I think the one at the south end is not lit very well. And also the one at Pavement and Beach has never really been lit the way it should be. So just more intense lighting. Other than that, I think it's fantastic. I think that we should go ahead and update those signs. Thank you.
Mayor Hoffman.
So I like the teal color with the white logo, and I do like the use of the logo just because I'm not going to say logo, artwork, because it's become so recognizable. And I think that the city seal, it's just really hard to identify what that even is from a distance. So I support that. I think also keeping them clean if they're not that white color. Fernando was saying pink, but it looks like it's white to me. I'm not sure if we were talking about the same thing. My concern is for the south end sign that's up on the screen now. That was a pretty recent addition to our landscape, and I believe it was led by citizens in our community. And there was fundraising. I know I bought either one of the C's or the H, I can't remember, but it was fundraising done through the community to pay to put that sign there. So I almost think that should be, I think, repaint it, maybe the background in the same color as the rest of the signs. It's already pretty close, but I like the look of it. It's nice and modern and it fits that area really well. I would definitely, the sign that's over by Huguenot Park / the Jack's Beach Tennis Center. So this is going to be the replacement for the monument sign that's already there.
Yes.
Okay. Is that the one with all the Lions Club and the Rotary sign and all that stuff?
No, this is just at the corner of 16th South and A1A.
Okay.
Right there in front of the tennis center.
Well, that other sign doesn't look great. I'll be honest, where I think the Purple Heart City sign is there and some other stuff. I'm sorry, I should have paid a little more attention, but I just remember noticing it doesn't look great. And then there's some also a monument sign at Gonzalez Park that is looking dated. So hopefully we're including that on the list. And I agree with Dan, the sign at Penman and Beach, I would definitely update that one with the look that you have for the South End sign, but it's the wrong font, it's the wrong colors, but it doesn't matter because you can't see it.
Yes, I think we're trying to do all of the signs to make it consistent throughout the city. But I will say, in reference to that welcome sign on the south side of the city, that subsequent to us putting the memo in, we had some of the community members approach us and let us know some of the history on that. And there was a good bit of investment, time and money wise. So they would like to see it remain the same, but maybe get a little TLC, paint the wall, change the landscape some, do the uplighting. But again, that's, for you guys to decide.
I support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Dumont. Councilor Dumont?
Yeah, there I am. I was trying to find it, and the signs are taking up my screen. Hello. So I agree with what people have said. I have heard a lot about the one on the south side. Those were individually purchased letters. And it, it wasn't a city venture to begin with. So, I've got a whole packet of notes from people on all of this stuff, which I'm glad to share. So with the one on the south side, like the mayor said, it needs to be repainted behind, but the letters really don't need to be changed. One of the things that I've noticed, which isn't in the notes, is the south side current text aligns with the skate park. That's what the Jack's Beach skate park. It's the same text, same kind of a metal feel to it. And so I think we should be able to leverage that in the other areas. So a couple other comments, and these are from artsy people who look at art type stuff. One comment is it looks like and this is beyond what we do, at this point, is that the lifeguard chair actually looks like a tennis chair. And I don't know, like a tennis coach, like the people who judge the tennis courts, looks like one of those chairs. And I don't know if it's because of the Jack's Beach tennis court. Similarly, there's a question as to why you have the established, because it's so small that it's not easily readable from somebody driving by. So these signs are for people who are driving, and you can't see the established. So you need the Jack's Beach Tennis Club, which brings me into the point of having a sign there is to promote the tennis club, not Jack's Beach. So the tennis club should be in the big letters and Jack's Beach in the smaller letters, so people know what it is that they are looking for. With regard to the sign that you have up on the screen, the Jack's Beach Tennis Club, there's too much white space. That's what the notes say. So too much white space, and the type style is too thin for tennis club. And these are artist designer people who are giving this feedback. So they are the ones who do this for a living. So it's not me. I would say that we should be citing and such. And I could argue about which type of citation you should use, but this is art. The tennis club, too much. So going back to South Jack's Beach, I have the note that there's too much going on and the scale is all wrong. So if we choose to do the Jack's Beach, the scale is wrong for the curvature of the platform that is there. And the note here is Jack's Beach should hire a nationally known environmental graphic firm. So there are professionals who do graphics and the outdoors for a living. And if we really want to make things pop, then they are the ones that we should be talking to. We shouldn't be trying to decide it by a former police officer, an engineer, a developer, a bar manager, a arts museum person, a director, and an engineer and an academic trying to figure out how this would work and attract people. There are people who do this for a living that we should really rely on them. If we decide to totally do a rehash of how we want our signs to look and be effective in what it is that we are trying to achieve for the city. Thank you.
Councilor Nichols.
I'd be fine with leaving the South Welcome sign, just upgraded a little bit. Those, the size of those that are pictured right now, obviously, I'd like to see something much larger if we are going to make a change. I like the direction we're going. Just something doesn't feel the. I like those, but the other one for the tennis court doesn't seem like the size is right. Doesn't seem like the text is right for the sign. I don't know how we can modify that, or if we need to put something on there so it's balanced and there's not as much white space.
Councilor Golding.
Thank you. I too spoke with some of the citizens who were involved in the South Beach welcome sign. And with that being a community-driven initiative, I think that we should respect that and we should leave it the way it is, especially since several people invested their money into that sign. It could use some sprucing up with paint, yes, for sure. But I say unless the like what we did with the Sunshine Park, unless the community who was involved in it wants to see something done differently, I would prefer that we leave it the way it is. And I agree with the feedback that was shared by Ms. Dumont on those. If you bring up the tennis sign, one of those tennis club signs, I think it really, the text does need to be bigger. If you look at the one that has the Penman Park, that's a that's a really good example. You see Penman Park really jumps out at you, and the logo should not be so prominent, because it should be easy for people to know what is this sign, telling us this facility is, and the logo should definitely be secondary to what the name of the facility is. And Gonzalez Park, thank you, Mayor, for bringing that up, because that's one that has got to get addressed because it looks terrible. So we definitely need to address that. And I'm glad that you guys have that on your radar. The only other thing I'm going to say, and I know this is probably not going to be, it's not going to be popular by any means, but I've never been thrilled with this logo. And unfortunately, that logo was not actually selected by the city council. It just ended up being somebody in the city just decided to put it on the water tower, and it's grown legs of its own. And, I'm really disappointed that we didn't have more conversation about what the branding would be for Jack's Beach than what happened with that logo. It is what it is, just as the mayor said in the last meeting. It's the horse is out of the barn. There's not anything that we can do about it. But I just wanted to share that when we're talking about branding, I feel like we need to have have more conversation about that, rather, and not have it be something that just automatically happen one day without any approval by the city council. So I hope that going forward, and I appreciate the fact that you guys are coming to us with this, because I think there needs to be good conversation about how we go forward with the branding for our city.
Councilor Stokes.
All right, thanks. Well, I was going to echo a lot about that. To me, this is branding, marketing of our city. I think that this is a great opportunity to engage even a local marketing branding firm to really run with this project. Give them our signs, and you know, I'm not huge on the color schemes. I worry about maintenance. I said it, I don't know how many briefings ago, but it was a while back about our entry signs. I don't think they need a renovation. I think that they need TLC most than anything. The paint on a lot of our signs has been not doing good. I've sent photos in on some of the signs that have had graffiti and dust and all sorts of stuff. I don't know if it's dust. I don't know what it was. All film all over the signs. So with a teal and white, and especially a white background, I really worry about that it's just going to be green and gnarly looking pretty quickly. But I think that this is a great opportunity to come up with a really consistent branding and really take our time and not rush to come up with some signs that these like mentioned, these have been here for 5 years, predates some of us on council, and these could outlive some of us, or definitely go through another iteration. So I think that we should take our time, get some really solid marketing branding, because this is how we show ourselves to residents, visitors, all the above of what Jack's Beach is, and take pride in. And I think we really need to do some TLC on that south end sign. I really like that sign. I think that would be a great entry sign on all the entrances. I really like that sign. I think it looks good. And but I agree. Councilmember Jansen brought it up. Our signs need lighting. They need TLC more above rebranding, and we definitely need to come up with some more, get some marketing, rebranding people, because this doesn't for me personally isn't the brand that I really think we need. And I didn't like the old one either, so I'm not a huge fan of the new one. So, but that's my opinion, and hopefully we can come up with something really cool that looks great for the city.
Councilor Meza.
Yes, a couple of things. On the south end sign where it says "Welcome to Jacksonville Beach," it definitely needs TLC. And if we do decide to go with that sign, with the one we currently have, obviously TLC, maybe add those Lifeguard chairs on the end to make it pop more. I don't know. It's just my opinion. And if we were to change it to where the two samples or the two examples that Molly provided, and if we were to take the old Jacksonville Beach sign, just an idea, or what everybody, hopefully I'll get some feedback if it's okay on, since we might be managing the pier, the entrance of the pier could use those Jacksonville Beach sign. If we were to move forward with rebranding, take those letters and put them at the pier. And Molly, on the, where am I looking at? Here it is. On the Jack's Beach Tennis Club, you have the top one, whereas Jack's is, what color is that? Pink? What color is that? I'm just calling it pink.
Yeah, it's a pink color.
Pinkish. I like that color. It pops. I would like to see more. Besides these two examples that you provided, I would like to see a couple more just to see we can get a feel. The white, I feel on the bottom one, I feel like that white is just gets dirty too quick. That's just my opinion. I know this is not going to be a final. And then the second thing, there's the welcome sign on the north end. Is that one going to be rebranded too, or is it just the one by Fletcher on the median?
That would be up to you guys. If you want to look at creating a different logo, get with some marketing firms, that kind of thing, or it's whatever you would like. I think it would be nice to have consistency across the city, whatever we determine that is. But it would be ideal to have the majority of the signs being similar or the same.
I thought we were going to try to be consistent with being inconsistent. I know we made that comment a couple times already. The other thing I was going to try to say on the Gonzalez Park, that letter, I can't remember if it was the N or the L. It was either completely missing or it was torn down or it was half of it. This is a couple months when I drove by. And I think that's all I have for now. I just had a brain fart, so I'll come back to you.
Councilor Dumont.
Thank you. So I'm glad to hear that a lot of people are not in favor of doing anything other than refreshing the one in South Jack's Beach. Paint the background, the letters stay there. But if we want to go with consistency, then that would be the consistency throughout the city if that is what our goal is. I agree with Sandy, even though it's an unpopular position. This was not a logo that was ever voted on. It was kind of one of those things that, it wasn't strongly argued against, so it just kind of became. I argued against it, and Chris was the only one she's the only one on council. I was in that meeting when the consultants were there. I'm like, this is a logo for Jacksonville and their beach. And we are not their beach. We are our own city who happens to have a beach that they help to fund. And so I was very much against this logo, and lo and behold, it ends up on the water tower by my house. I don't know how that happened, but it did. And so if we look at, I guess it's the next agenda item, the identity comp sheet, where with all of the proofs of everything that you can throw the lifeguard chair into that you could possibly imagine, the comment I got is, this is overkill on the use of chair logo. It loses impact. We call it dilutes. And so, yes, it is a lot of money to repaint the water towers. I totally get it. So we can leave it up there, but we can not keep dumping money into a logo and a design that we don't think really works for us. Is it a tennis chair? Is it a lifeguard chair? What is it? I know Fernando likes the different colors. I think that that's problematic because when you look at it, it's Jack's, and then Beach is kind of an afterthought, and it's a smaller logo. So it's not like it's a unified, this is the name of our city. There's Jack's, and then there's Beach. And I think that that's more problematic. You want the name of the entity to be uniform, not broken up. So I have a problem with that. And then with regard to signs, I'm concerned about I think it's lifeguard chair orange. I don't know if that's really if there's truly a name for that, but you called it pink, Fernando. I think it's like lifeguard chair orange or red or whatever they call it. My concern is that fades off to pale pink. And so we need to be cautious that we got a lot of sun and these colors are going to fade, and will that fade really impact how it is perceived in public? So I think while I really love where we're trying to go, I think this is a big pause on signs, And we've really got to think about what it is that we want to invest taxpayer dollars into with regard to signs to make sure they're uniform throughout the city. There's something that's agreed on and voted on, and that we have a lot of citizen input on. Those are just my thoughts, because I know the lifeguard chair, not so much. I think there were 4 citizens, maybe 5 citizens in that meeting where I think it passed in the briefing, and I use that term lightly. It was me, Sandy, possibly Gary Paytow, and maybe one other one when the briefing was going on in that back room. That is when it officially passed, even though there was no vote, but there was no, we want to go back to the drawing board. So I remember the meeting, and I was taken aback when I found out that it was decided on that this is going to be the logo.
Councilor Golding?
Yeah, just real quickly, I echo the comments that were made by the council members with regard to the concerns about the maintenance and the colors, and how well the colors will withstand the hot sun that we have on a daily basis. That was one of the first things I thought of when I saw, because that red is definitely, or whatever color it is definitely going to fade. And the white background, again, concerning, because how well is that going to be able to be kept clean and well maintained? But so, I mean, I have to say that I'm in the same camp that Mr. Stokes is in, that, is this an opportunity for us to put some time into branding and get something put together that we all agree that we want to move forward with. So yeah, I would be willing to go, I'd be willing to discuss that further.
The nice part is, if you all looked at the strategic plan email I sent you last week, we do have a branding project in there. So that is something we will be discussing in the next couple of years to try and tackle. Mayor Hoffman, followed by Councilor Meza.
Just for the benefit of everybody else, the lifeguard chair logo. Okay, so the lifeguard chair is what you're calling pink? Okay, I'm sorry, I was confused. I was like, is my color off on my screen here? And it is kind of pink, which is weird because lifeguard chairs are definitely orange-y red. The lifeguard chair logo was proposed by Dix Height as part of a CRA project. So not only was it never voted on, but it's not even supposed to be for the whole city. It's supposed to be for downtown. And oddly enough, downtown is the only place in town that you cannot find that logo anywhere unless it's on the Deck the Chairs submission by the city of Jacksonville Beach. That being said, people love this logo. If we put it on hats and shirts and sold it, people would be going crazy for it. So my objection to it wasn't that I didn't like the logo, although I didn't love the logo. It was the process, which was the fact that someone told Dix Height we were going with it, and we never actually voted on it, the CRA or the council. So that being said, we have something that's popular. It's identified with us. However it happened, it's now on both of the water towers. I think it looks good and ties together all of our, if it's on the sign, it will tie things together really nicely, because I just don't think the city seal identifies us at all. I have never looked at it and seen a tennis judge's chair. Probably only real avid tennis players would do that, but now I'll probably see it forevermore. Is there, with regards to the sign at the north end by Fletcher, that sign is different than the other signs we've been talking about, because it's not a monument sign and it's in the middle of a median. So I don't know that we can do that in the same breath as the ones that we're working on now. And I don't know what kind of other property we have up there that would work for a bigger sign. So That one is, it looks like the wayfinding signs that are kind of here in the central part of the beaches with downtown, with pointing out the community theater and those. So that would probably be maybe within, when we get to those signs, that we deal with that one. It's just my thought. And then I agree with the maintenance and the colors and everything like that. If you've gone next to any of these signs, they are really faded. The seal is just a sticker. It peels off. It's just, they're just in terrible shape. So I think we're doing so much work in creating some pride in our parks and recreation amenities here that those signs are just not, they're not acceptable. Molly, for these mock-ups, are these from a sign company? Are you guys already working with someone?
We wanted to give you some ideas, some different directions that we could take this. We're happy to go to marketing firms, or I know Councilor Dumont mentioned the environmental aspect of the larger outdoor park signs. We're happy to do that as well. If you want a total rebrand, we're happy to do that too. But
I wouldn't sign up for that if I were you, because that's like a strategic planning level kind of process. So but I would say when you do go to the professional sign companies, they know how to lay things out and how to size things for readability and make those kind of recommendations that are some of the concerns. So my position is to support moving forward with this, enlisting a sign company, or doing the RFP or whatever the next step would be for you guys, and let the professionals tell us. But I also think the South End sign could be a model for the monument sign that's over here on Beach Boulevard, rather than, for the consistency, if it's a big old sign that says Jacksonville Beach, that it looks like that one, because they couldn't look more different at this point.
sure.
Councilor Meza?
Well, before I begin, Molly and Jason and Parks and Rec, thank you so much for putting this together. You guys are being proactive, and I appreciate it very much, and I know my colleagues do as well. The Jack's Beach logo, I did not know that, but Mayor, since you're part of the Beaches Historic Museum, this could be a good history point in 100 years where, how did this sign come about? We don't know. It just snuck in, something interesting. So I think it's pretty cool. And you were right. A lot of people do love the sign. And like you said, if you put that on a hat and shirt, people will buy it. I'm just happy we're doing this. That's all. I'm really am. It's about time. And yeah, I'm just happy. That's all. Thank you, guys.
We've got 3 more hands raised. So after we get through Councilor Stokes, I'd like to switch to our last item. But we have Councilor Dumont, Councilor Jansen, and Councilor Stokes.
Thank you. I appreciate everything that's been said about the signs and the logos and all that. And I'm kind of taken aback that people have heard people loving this sign. I have not heard anyone who likes it. I have for years been hearing, what is that on our water tower? You can't distinguish what it is, and all of that. So I've gotten bad feedback for the sign, and I just kind of go, it really is a lifeguard chair. I'm not saying we need to repaint the water towers. I do think that we might want to look into, if anything, a complementary design that gets voted in to be the sign, like the brand that's on all the other signs. Again, I have not heard anyone who says that they thought that was a good design, that they liked it. I've heard the exact opposite. So I guess we just hang out in different crowds, different circles, which that's cool. That means that we get a good representation of our community on this council, which is fabulous. So I'm happy to move forward. I just think that we should do so strategically and cautiously.
Councilor Jansen, followed by Councilor Stokes.
Okay, so full transparency. I thought that logo was passed by previous councils or something. I had no idea. So thanks for the history lesson, Mayor. I learned something tonight. I do like the logo, and I wasn't just a police officer. I hate to bust Georgette's bubble, but prior to becoming a police officer, I did 9 years as a graphic artist. And you're right, the Jackson Beach should be the same size. It should be representative of the city. So I agree with you in that context. But also to Sandy's point, the horse has left the barn. So we're kind of stuck with what we have. It's on 2 water towers. It's on shirts, hats, and it goes beyond that as well. So I like it. I've heard other people that do like it. And juxtaposed to what you said, Mr. Mott, everyone I've talked to, they appreciate it. So, and I have not heard, this is the first time I've heard it called a tennis coaches or tennis judges chair, but I can see that. So,
Councilor Stokes, bring it home.
Yes. So I Googled the Jacks Beach water tower to look at the water tower design again. And sure, and lo and behold, and looking at pictures, I found the branding company that did our branding. I guess they did it for Dick's High. I sent it to Mike for distribution. Anybody wants to look at it. It's a company out of Orlando called Remixed. If we do go that option, they've already done work for us. So it might be able to offer us a good deal, but there is a really cool logo on their webpage that I guess never got into production. Cooler than I think the Jacks Beach Lifeguard chair. So anybody has interest in checking that out, it's pretty cool. And I would suggest, checking them out for the branding process since we've used them before, and we're on their website, proudly featured. So I'll just bring it home with that.
Okay.
Ooh, one last thing, just real quick. If we do move forward and we're going to hire a sign company, just food for thought. If we do open the RFP, if a local company would participate or be involved, if possible. That's it.
Yeah, that would depend on the request for proposal and if they meet the qualification requirements. At that point, it's open to anyone. Okay, I think we've got some direction on that topic. So Molly, we'll go into the final item. I don't know if you're starting that one or if you're turning it over to Jason.
I'll turn it over to Jason. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to be very brief and turn it over to Jim Harriet, our consultant on the Urban Trails project. They've done a lot of good work so far in developing our master plan. And they're here tonight to give council a briefing on where they are in the process and then ask for some direction on some of the concepts. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Thank you, Jason. Mayor Hoffman, council members, I appreciate being here. It's been a pleasure working with your staff. Also here with me is Lori Hall, our design department director, and Craig Brashear, our planning department director. We've been leading this project over the past couple of months. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll walk through the presentation. Let's see. Can everybody see that come up? Is that visible to everybody, I think?
Yes, it is.
Very good. As we get started, I've broken this presentation into 4 parts. Just kind of walk you through. The first part is just kind of an overview of what's gotten us to this point and what we've done so far. And then talk a little bit about the priority and how we came up with it, the groundwork for that. The second part, we'll talk about First Street and specifically the residential areas of First Street. We've researched it quite a bit, and Jason's conveyed that it's a pretty big policy discussion for you. The third part, it would be the commercial section of First Street. And then the fourth part, we'll just walk through the different trail types that we've been working on for your network and kind of where they lay out. And as we go through, I'll explain why and how each of those trail types are what they are and why they make sense. On the goals and objectives, we've talked to the community, and this came out in a couple of meetings. We asked for the community ideas and what they thought, and several things jumped out. One was the connectivity of the trail system and being able to reach not just the parks, which is, I'm told, how it started, but also the commercial areas in and around the community, the beaches, obviously, just creating a recreational and transportation network. But even more important to that, what's the experience? And everybody resoundingly said they wanted a safe trail separated from traffic. And those two themes will come up over and over again as we go through this presentation. We also ask people for examples of places they've been or trails they've ridden on that have kind of stuck with them over time, and what they looked like. And almost everyone, brought forward ideas of trails that we went back and researched, and they all fit this kind of Greenway category, this ride down a converted railroad corridor, ride through the woods, or walk through the woods, walks along waterways. And you've got a little bit of a challenge there because Jacksonville Beach is built out and there's not a lot of those greenways. So we've tried to address that and capture that puts that feel back into the network. The connectivity, bike ped priority, that was a topic that came up quite a bit and was very important to the community. And at some point in this, we will be addressing what the uses are. We've already started working on that and how those uses fit on the trail network. There have been questions in the public workshops that we've had about bike, ped, rollerblades, e-bikes, scooters, golf carts. How do all these come together? So let me start out with the network that we worked on, and your staff contributed a lot to this, but we did actually send 2 teams of people out to walk these and experience these and take a look at these. We did a lot of desk work to figure out what the right-of-ways were. The heavy line is the trail corridor that lays right over the top of the street. So what is the shaded line over the top of it? We started out with an idea of an 8-minute or a 15-minute walk from the trail, making sure that everybody was within an 8 or a 15-minute walk. And when we laid that band over the top of the trail network, the entire city was covered with the shading. So we backed it off, and what you can see there is about a 2-minute, maybe 3-minute walk to a trail. This starts the groundwork of what we can do with the network and how we start connecting it up. So if you're in that band, you're only a couple minutes away. But if you look at the size of the band, you're 4 minutes or 5 minutes walk away. And most of the city is within those areas. Most of the residences and businesses are within those areas. So our next step when we present the master plan to you will be to fill out that network a little bit with some secondary trails. This shows a primary trail, and the graphic on the right shows a blue band around an area. You can see it encompassing First Street on the far east side. Penman Road, we know, is a project that the city of Jacksonville is working on. That tends to be the west band. And then the north-south areas touch on your 2 greenways that you have. On the south side, towards the south end of the golf course, you've got a canal that has a fairly wide right-of-way that we think would be an excellent opportunity for a trail. And then on the north side, you've got a corridor that has a wide median, and we would build a trail down through that median and along that roadway. That creates and meets one of the other objectives that the community had talked about quite a bit, which was not just doing an out and back trail, but do a loop so that you can start in some place and loop yourself back around to where you started, as opposed to just driving up one direction of a trail and then, or riding up one direction or walking up one direction and coming back the same way. The north side, you can see the east-west route on 15th Avenue, 1st Street. On the bottom left corner of the map, there's this kind of loop that happens. We would bring the trail across Beach Boulevard. We would recommend bringing the trail across Beach Boulevard at a signal. But we also did some math and figured out that the route around the bridge and underneath the bridge is actually quite interesting. It's very green and there's more of a nature to it. It puts you out by the water and it's not much of a longer ride. And I have to admit, as a bike rider or cyclist, I'd probably take that route as opposed to waiting for a traffic signal, just because it puts a little more exercise in the day. Much nicer walk, much nicer experience. So that's why that little group of trails stretches out Beach Boulevard like that. In the southern end of the city, the corridor along the drainage canal right up in this area, 12th, comes along the back of the golf course. We've talked to parks and the golf course superintendents, and they're very happy with and encouraging a route through the golf course, which is great because it adds a greenway space to your city for a trail system. We haven't laid out how that would fit yet. That's on the task for the next week or two. But there is some room and there is some ability to do that. And in your capital improvement program, there's some funding set aside to do some work on the golf course. So we're trying to make those two connect up. Also down in the southwestern section of the city, you've got the old landfill that several residents brought up as a great opportunity for another green space and bringing people out to a different area. Instead of just riding along the street, there's an opportunity to get out away from the street and away from the traffic a little bit. So let's talk about First Street, and I'll describe the safety environments that I think you'd want to look for, and what we looked for as we went through this part of the project. This is actually a street in Greenwood, Indiana. And I found this and picked this out because it originally was a road that's roughly the same width of First Street, maybe a foot or two different, but from curb to curb, it was about the same width of First Street. And they rebuilt it. But the 2 points I'd bring out is one, they separated the trail from the roadway. You can see that's about a 4-foot separator. There's 2 points that probably work for Greenwood that probably wouldn't work for Jacksonville Beach. The 4-foot is grass. There's no curb to it. I can tell you that 4 feet in Florida probably doesn't end up being grass for very long. So we would recommend a different treatment to it. But then the trail pavement markings have a very unique trail corridor pavement markings. You can see the green center line, not necessarily needed, but there is a green center line there. And then there's some other treatments we'll show you. This is the before and after of that street. Like I said, this is roughly the width, maybe a few feet wider than your first street. And then they retooled that street into 2 lanes with a separation. In this segment, they do have a curb for that 4-foot separator, and then a trail that's roughly 10 to 12 feet wide. So let's look at the First Street options pretty quick. We did look at a one-way option. It fit within the corridor. You have 30 feet between curbs, and that would allow the 12-foot travel lane with an 8-foot buffer. That puts you at 20 feet, then another 10-foot trail. In this section, I would expect the use of this trail down First to be highly used, be a pretty popular route. It's right there by the beach. It's providing access to the beach. It's providing access to commercial areas. I would expect its use to be pretty significant. So when you think about a trail in this corridor, I'd think of a couple of things. 12 foot would be the ideal width if you're bringing together different modes, bicycles, walkers, joggers. In this case, you've also got the sidewalk off to the edge on both sides of the road. So you could probably get it down to 10 foot. We put the 8-foot buffer into this area because it allows you to do some treatments on separating the trail from the roadway. Creates a much safer environment. The wider you can create that space between the trail and the roadway, the much safer it becomes. And I used a very scientific method of doing that, which was how comfortable would I feel if I had a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old riding their bike with me on this trail, and how wide would I want that buffer to be? That's really how I judged the safety element of it. So as we go through these, I'd recommend you look at that too. Now, something that jumps right out, we did it for graphical purposes, but there's obviously a driveway on the one side and you can't get to it. I'll address that in just a minute, but I wanted to make sure we were showing the buffer in between the trail and the one-way travel lane. So this is the same cross section, but we've stretched the trail out and moved it over to the edge of the sidewalk. So that 4-foot grass strip that you can see in option 1 that exists out there, we've taken that and we've put a trail over the top of it. It's got 2-way travel on this cross section with 11-foot lanes and a 2-foot buffer. 2 foot is an at street level buffer. It's just a pavement marking buffer. I wouldn't recommend that. Honestly, I don't think it provides the safety you're looking for in what you asked for when you put the call out. I think it's kind of like a bike lane more than it is anything else. I don't think it would be a comfortable walking environment. You could narrow the lanes down to 10 feet, 10 foot lanes are your minimum, and you could widen this out to 4 feet if you wanted. That would be one way to get that 4 foot. But if you're doing a raised separator, I would recommend no less than 4 feet. That allows you to sign it if necessary. So this was the third option. This option claims the sidewalk and the grass strip for the trail, puts in a 7-foot buffer and then 2 10-foot travel lanes. So really you're from the back of one sidewalk to the curb on the other side of the road, you've accomplished this and you've put this system in. That 7-foot buffer is easily plantable, would raise it with curbs, and I think it would create a very nice environment. One of the questions we got at the public meeting was, how do you sign this? How do you make this work from a traffic standpoint, this interaction? And on these graphics, we've shown this buffer going right across driveways. So let me show you, let's jump back to that Greenwood example. First thing on the signing is you would sign just generally that your traffic is going to make its right turns yielding to these trail users. It's the easiest way to do it. This is actually a sign that I hadn't seen before, but I like it a lot. And it would recommend this type of treatment down the corridor. Your vehicle travel is going to be fairly slow, I would imagine, through this corridor, 25, maybe 30 miles an hour tops. The cars would then yield to the bike lanes. It's a simple message. Everybody would understand it. What do you do at the driveways? Excuse me. So there's two things here. The first is you change what they did in Greenwood, which I think is a good idea. They changed pavements. They went from an asphalt to a concrete. They did change the colors in spots, and then they created a delineated, clearly delineated crosswalk. Simple treatments, easy treatments. You can see the sign up at the top of the screen in that picture. In general driveways, they did the curb radii, and then they marked across that driveway with the green pavement markings. It looks white here, but I can tell you they're green. That matches the center line green that you saw in the other picture, just kind of themes it out, tells the drivers in cars what they're experiencing as they go across the trail, tells the trail users where they're at and what they're crossing as they're going down the corridor. So that answers the question of, so how do you make these two work together? So the commercial section, I want to run through some pictures because this is kind of an interesting part. You've started approaching this idea, but to bring this shared street concept into your commercial area, and you're very close to it right now. You'll see it. You'll probably recognize it as I went through these, but some of the keys are the flush pavement, where the sidewalk or traditional pedestrian areas tend to work their way out into the travel lanes. You add street furniture, the lights, you bring the people closer down to where the traffic is, or where the vehicle travel is, and then you change pavement textures to delineate where routes are. This is Wall Street, Nashville, if you've ever been there. It's a very active street. If you drive down it, you're at a almost complete crawl. Washington Street Mall, same thing. You can see the street furniture, the flush pavement, differing pavement textures, but vehicles are still using it. In Boston, similar example with the street textures and change. You can see deliveries can still be made in this environment, but it's obviously in this application a very comfortable street to be on foot. It just kind of brings the traffic together. And I think at one of the workshops, I told the story of when we were doing some reconnaissance for this project. I think I ended up down in your downtown area during an art fair, and people were just moving in between the cars and out into the cars and everything. And I was certain that I was in the wrong spot. I was certain that I had missed some road closed sign somewhere. I had not, but I was certain that it happened. And that's the type of environment you want to create. State Street in Madison, Wisconsin, they did not change the curb lines, but they allow pedestrian and bicycles to run down the middle of the street. The street itself is only open to official traffic, state vehicles, emergency vehicles, delivery vehicles. The point I'm making is you can create a trail out of the street you have, doing some of these same techniques. This is 16th Street. It's essentially a mall in downtown Denver. And they run their transit vehicle up and down the mall. They do have a pavement texture change with a curb on one side, but a flush street on the other, and on the right-hand side, the street furniture. These are some streets in Florida that have fit the same type areas. So obviously you recognize this First Street, and it has some of the same attributes. So what would you do to bring traffic down to a level and recreate this as that First Street trail corridor all the way through? There are possibilities that you could add street furniture to this. You could change the time of day where deliveries can be made. You could close it off to traffic completely, or you could open it for periods of time. A couple of pieces of feedback we got from residents was they weren't quite sure what to do when they were down here. They weren't sure if they were allowed to park. Sometimes they could park. They weren't really sure. There are options, and our designers took a look at recreating some of the pictures I've just walked through for your downtown area. This would obviously create a one-way travel or delivery section through the corridor, but when you bring down the street furniture and pull it into the center, and you add some landscaping and invite people down to the street, it completely changes the makeup for that and starts to create a trail. This is key because that First Street runs the entire length of your city, north to south. It's along the East Coast Greenway route, and would probably be a huge asset and interest point for the community. So in the fourth part, wanted to walk through the trail types. We have shown these in the workshops, but this is basically what we're working off of, based on different corridors and right-of-ways you've have throughout the city. The A-type corridors are Greenway Trails. You see an A down here. I'll show you the south map. You've got more greenways. Those are completely set aside for trails. B is a protected trail. B2 is kind of a unique opportunity I think you have in a couple areas, which is to convert a street to a protected trail. And then the C trails is more of it's separated, but it's not a huge corridor or a huge width, but it provides the same amenities. On the south side, I mentioned the Greenway Trails up through the golf course and down in the landfill. Mentioned those earlier. So what's the Greenway Trail look like? It's a dedicated facility. These are completely off-road, completely separated. This is what the communities kind of looked at and said, you know, we'd love to have these around Jacksonville Beach. And you have a couple of areas for them. And we have an idea of creating a few more. The protected path, the roadway is completely separate from the roadway corridor. There is more than enough safety separation, provides a very comfortable ride or walk or jogging element. We provided some pictures showing that. And then the converted street and protected path. This basically takes I would say an underutilized or extremely under capacity roadway. The one that stands out is 8th Avenue that runs up through the northern part of the city, through the on either side of Beach. The reason it stands out is I was down in your community and driving around and took 8th Avenue during rush hour. There were stop signs every block. I had to stop every block, but nobody else was using it. I never saw another car. So, you know, what jumped out at me was, well, we can take that underutilized capacity and recreate a trail, separate it from a single travel lane, make the travel lane one way, provide access to the driveways, and then build out a 10 to 12 foot trail with the buffer and start to recreate a greenway through those corridors that are underutilized. Mount Dora has a corridor that they did something very similar to this, and it's a very popular corridor. And then the adjacent path. This is where the path is in the right of way. You maintain the two lanes of traffic, but you're right up on the edge of the roadway, usually about 4 feet. It's a little bit closer. I'm not sure how comfortable you would be, you know, for multiple types of users, you know, children riding their bikes on it. But there are ways to address that. This is Buckhead up north of Atlanta. Their trail runs right up along the roadway. It's about a 4 foot separation, and they've put this little fence or wrought iron fence down through there to kind of create the separation to keep the safety and the pedestrians from we'll say wandering into the travel. It's a very heavily traveled road. It's obviously not a safety feature for the cars. They would go right through that fence, but what happens is you're keeping the people back on the trail from a safety element. And that concludes the presentation. That kind of brings you up to speed on where we're at. We're working on a bunch of different things as we rapidly approach the finish line on this project. So with that, I'll turn the discussion back over to the council members, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Meza.
Jim, thank you for putting this together. It's well put together. It's amazing. I love this project. First question, what kind of cycle do you have? What kind of bike?
I have given up on road cycling. I used to run a road bike, and I've pretty much given up on that. Now I just ride a bike, and I've explained to people, it's a good, if I may, I've explained to people there's two types of ways to ride a bike, at least in the way I look at planning for facilities. One is a cyclist. Cyclists move, they strap their toes to the pedals they're traveling 16, 20 miles an hour, 24 miles an hour. You can get up a pretty good clip. A bicyclist or a bike rider is going to ride somewhere in the 8 to 10 to 11, 12 miles range. I'm now on the slower end of the spectrum than I ever was, than I was on the fast end. I get up to 24 miles on a bike now, and I think I can sense my mortality maybe. The reason I bring that up though is these facilities, these multi-use trails, are more for the bike riders than they are the cyclists. The cyclists are probably happier and more comfortable on the roadways, and that's how we've approached this.
Yeah, perfect. I just picked up cycling a year and a half ago and trying to, become an avid. The other thing too, this is for the council members. I know for the residential part, I like option 1 and option 3. Now, question for Jim, for the commercial side, obviously you guys had feedback from the community, but have you guys reached out to the businesses here in this area about maybe getting their input?
Good question. We have inventoried all the businesses. We know who to contact. We wanted to talk to you first. It's kind of a chicken and the egg. Do you talk to the city commissioners first, the council members first, or do you talk to the businesses first? We have a series of stakeholder meetings. We have several more, and this is going to be one of the topics coming up on the stakeholder discussions.
Okay. I have a business here in this area in downtown, and I think the owners in this area will appreciate if they were invited so they could give feedback. And also, I know there's every day, whether it's morning, lunchtime, afternoon, we always have delivery trucks, and they only park on certain parts of the street. Is on some of the avenues. I know on the streets, there's certain parts where they're not allowed to park to deliver goods, but I think they should at least provide feedback to you guys. So if once this is put together, it's all in conjunction and everybody's happy and everybody wins. But I do love where this is going. And I've been to some cities where they have these trails and I rent bikes, and it's pretty cool. I enjoy it a lot. So I'm looking forward to this. Oh, one last thing, Mike, I know last year we were talking about the financial impact in this. Is this where I say where I stand on the financial aspect of this, or is this until we finally get the actual cost?
This isn't where we would be talking about the cost and how we do the outlay to achieve the plan. We wait until the plan is complete. We take a look at the preliminary estimates for different segments. And at that point in time, we talk about timeframes and expenditures. So
okay, thank
you. A little bit more time.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Jansen.
Real quick, I love the trail. Well, first off, good job, Jim and Lori. I think y'all did a fantastic job. Good presentation. The environmental trail along the golf course, I really like that, as long as Chet's the one golfing, because if it's me or Mike, I think you're taking your life in your own hands. So we'd have to consider the safety of, a trail along a golf course, because I know that there may be some errant balls.
Absolutely, and that's an excellent point. It's when this was brought up, we started researching that, and it's surprising how many trails do run in and around golf courses, and there's a lot of ways to address the errant golf ball shots. So,
and thank you, Dan, for covering us from a liability perspective. You're absolutely right. If you and I are in the same cart, we got problems. Councilmember Dumont.
Thank you. I'm glad that you gave Chet kudos for his golfing abilities and that he wouldn't be the one knocking people off their bikes or whatnot. So thank you. I like the whole design and the feel and all of that. Some concerns, though, that have been brought to my attention end up being in the residential area, specifically in South Jacks Beach. because there have been properties that they have had their front setbacks adjusted to a point where in some of these designs, they wouldn't have room in their driveways to actually fit their cars. Their cars would be hanging over the walkway. And as you noted, that these cars are going to have to back across the bike path as well as the buffer. And how it's drawn in the pictures, it doesn't look that problematic because there's a lot of space in between the driveways. However, in reality, those driveways are very close together. And so you'll have like driveway with maybe, the space that you have here would not allow. So in one of the renderings you showed, it showed like a driveway and a little bit of a buffer and a curb kind of a thing. And you wouldn't be able to do that specifically in South Jacks Beach on First Street. Just because of how development has developed in the area. So it makes some of that problematic. So I don't know if that's an area that you really need to look more into, like do a walk around just in South Jacks Beach, because you'll see that it's rather unique and it's tight. And there's just not a lot of room. So on First Street in the south part of Jacksonville Beach, it's already a one-way road. One way with parking on one side, that tiny little bike lane, I'm going to put that in air quotes, on the other side, and a lot of driveways. So I'm not sure how we as a city would be able to accommodate some of these designs in that one section. And that would be, oh gosh, that would be 16th South all the way down to 37th, which brings me into a next question. From 37th South to Ponte Vedra Boulevard, First Street was not noted as having having one of these paths. So it was just it just ended at 37th. It didn't go down to Ponte Vedra Boulevard, and then Ponte Vedra Boulevard is what goes down to the St. Johns County line. So just a couple things to note there and some concerns that I have heard.
Good points. I would just, as we get into some of the details on some of these corridors, we are going back out and trying to figure out the approximate distances between the edge of the curb or the edge of the trail and the front yards. I understand that completely. We have tried to stay within the functional area of the street as opposed to within the right-of-way. We know some of the right-of-way is being used by the homeowners, and sometimes it's very hard to delineate, at least as the resident, where the right-of-way stops and the front yard begins. So we're trying to be very conscious of the fact that we're going to hold to the functional area of the street as much as possible. As to the very south end, we're still working on how to make the connections down into St. Johns County. In fact, we were working on doing some mapping and stuff last Friday, just before the weekend, right here in the office, to try and work that out. So right now the map gets very sketchy when you get down to the very south end.
Oh, sorry, before Sandy. While we're thinking about the south end, and you've noted the unique difference between on the width and the style of the road from 25th Avenue South down to 37th?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Golding.
Thank you. And thank you, Jim, for and Lori, for all that you guys have done with this so far. Can you talk, because you touched on this very briefly, can you talk about how the different modes would be handled? Because I know I've had several people ask me if golf carts would be able to use the trail. And you know, I know that you discussed this some in one of the workshops, and I think it's important to share the details about exactly what modes would be using the trail and then how that would be managed, because I would be concerned that we would end up seeing golf carts on these trails if golf carts are not supposed to be on the trails. So what is the thinking?
Yes, ma'am. So as part of the advertisement for this master plan, Mr. Fatides put in their policy structure request. And this is one of the policy structures. So we're going to lay this out to you in the document from a policy standpoint. But I'll summarize it here, and having done these plans before. When you're talking multi-use, you've got varying speeds of, we'll say, people movement. A walker moves at 3 to 4 miles an hour comfortably, but a golf cart can move at 24 miles an hour. That's a vast difference in speed. And that's where you run into the problems. So what we're going to try and do is lay out, walkers and bike riders tend to be more compatible. A 4 mile an hour speed versus a 7, 8, 9, 10 mile an hour speed is more compatible together. So bikes and pedestrians, joggers, 5, 6 miles an hour, rollerbladers, skateboarders, those tend to fit into the same realm. Where you get worried is the faster the vehicles go. So golf carts tend to sit up at the upper end of that range. And my recommendation policy-wide would be to not allow them on the trail, but to allow them in the roadway. If Jacksonville Beach is to be desires to be a golf cart community, we can lay out the policy work that shows you how to do that from a community-wide standpoint. I know there's a lot of golf carts out there used already. So that's the separation right there. It all is based on the speed of travel and how quickly each different use can adjust to somebody else on the trail. And golf carts just don't fit that bill. Now, the wild card that's new is, what do you do with these new e-bikes? Because they move closer to a golf cart speed than they move to a pedal bike. And what do you do with the scooters that move along at a stunningly fast clip sometimes? So we're working on that and researching it a bit more. But the idea is to keep similar speed uses together on the trail, and I think then you'll have a better environment on that trail, a much safer environment. The other end of that, the high end of that spectrum too, is the cyclists, like I mentioned before. But you don't tend to find cyclists wanting to be on these trails. It's just too hard to ride on them. It's just too conflicting for a cyclist to ride.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you brought up the e-bikes, because I'm a jogger / runner, whatever you want, based on my speed, whatever I'm classified as. And the e-bikes, definitely, they go pretty fast. So that was another one I was wondering about. So do you have any knowledge of what other communities are doing with regards to e-bikes on these trails?
E-bikes are kind of the wild card, like I said. Same thing with scooters. And a lot of communities are starting to turn it into an enforcement question or issue, where, it's, yeah, you can be on the trail as an e-bike, but you can't go any faster than 10 miles an hour. Same thing with an electric scooter, but then you have to have the enforcement arm to enforce it and work that avenue. It's been fairly successful, and many times I think the community kind of comes along with it and complies with it. But it's still one of those new areas, and you experience the scooters on sidewalks nowadays. And I mean, in my neighborhood, a group of kids got scooters for Christmas, and the first question the HOA started asking was, where can they ride those things? They seem dangerous in the street, and they seem dangerous on the sidewalk. So it's a question that we'll just keep on working through and provide you an answer as part of that master plan.
Okay. And the only other comment I want to make is that when it comes to First Street and the concepts, you know, I like the idea of having a nicely separated trail from the roadway, and certainly the one that we're looking at is has a 7-foot buffer. And you know, I guess I understand the concerns too with how much space the trail is going to take away from any of the driveways that currently exist. But you know, I definitely like the concepts that have a decent amount of buffer. I definitely do not want to see us have something that was like one of the previous ones that was a 2-foot buffer or whatever that was that you had. I just don't think that would be safe. And so whichever direction we go in, I think it needs to have a good size buffer similar to the one that you've got showing on the screen right now.
Mayor Hoffman.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. This project has been really interesting and exciting to watch kind of come together. And I just wanted to make a few quick comments. I love the 8th Street concept of possibly taking over one of those lanes, especially because of how many kids are going that north-south to Fletcher High School, Fletcher Middle, and San Pablo. So the nice thing is our schools are kind of concentrated. I wish we had been in this mindset when we were redoing the drainage ditch that runs all along 8th or parallel to 8th, because that was a huge multi-million-dollar project that I always felt like had room for a little, you know, path along the canal there. But on the other hand, we are at the ground floor of the Penman Road project. So I'm glad that we'll be at the table in terms of implementing our plan there. Downtown, First Street downtown is already a shared roadway. So it's not as urgent to me as kind of the rest of First Street. And I will say our citizens and probably you as well, you mentioned are perplexed by the part. They were supposed to be parking spots, but then we realized they didn't work. So we put up signs that say no parking or parking sometimes. So I'm just going to say this with key staff members listening, that our downtown is littered with signs due to design that didn't work once implemented. So I would love to not keep doing that if possible, or to fix the problems and be able to take the signs up. And then this, speaking of signs, can we establish, if it's a separated path, can we just establish a speed limit for it?
Absolutely. That's definitely an option. Mm-hmm.
That's all. Thank you so much.
Councilor Stokes.
Yeah, for the council direction requested, I'm good with this option 3, or making, as the consultant recommended, making it one-way travel on First Street. It's one way down here and it works well. First Street in the commercial segment, definitely support no cars, the what do you call it? Closing the roadway. I've spoken on that one before. And comfortable with all the proposed treatments shown. Thankfully, I'll try not to hit anybody on the golf course, do my best, no promises. And if I'm comfortable with utilizing the undeveloped right away, as long as we give our citizens ample notice of what's going on and how it's going to be a benefit. I've got a right of way with an AT&T box that is absolutely no benefit in my front yard, but that's what's allowed to happen. So I would much rather have one of these there instead. So thank you.
And for mayor and council, if I can get a little bit more clarification on that last direction requested. If you take a look at the map that was shown to you by the consultant, in the southwest portion of the city, there's some areas of undeveloped right-of-way that are in people's rear yards. And I just wanted to make sure that you're comfortable with us proceeding from a planning perspective of looking at those as trail developments. knowing that for some of those people, right now it's a quiet backyard and it may turn into a trail that has street lights and traffic on it going until certain times of the day or evening. So I just wanted to make sure you were all comfortable with that. Specifically, the area that we're talking about is basically from the landfill at the southwest corner of the trail system, heading north up towards Osceola Avenue, and then ultimately up behind Seabreeze, connecting up into that neighborhood. So just wanted to make sure you're comfortable with us continuing that as a concept for a trail area. I see a couple heads nodding.
With regard to your question, I think that we need to reach out to the residents to find out if they're comfortable with that, and then how that's going to impact their property values and such before we decide for them.
We can certainly do some outreach in that portion of the city for those particular affected residents. We just needed, again, from a policy perspective, if it was a non-starter with council, we would probably take the eraser to the map. But if you like the idea of the potential of it being there, we can certainly do some outreach with those residents to see what the concerns might be, or maybe they would actually embrace it because it might make some of their routes shorter to go from point A to point B in the community as well.
I'd wait to hear back from how they feel about it, because it's not going in my backyard.
Councilor Meza?
I was going, oh yes, what my colleague Chet Stokes said about making in the downtown area no cars, I could agree with that. But if we were to move forward with that, what would we do about the hotels that are on First Street, especially in the main corridor? And then second, if we were to do that, can we, what would happen to the delivery trucks? I mean, I know there's many options. I just want to make sure that downtown is not overlooked, and I just want to bring in the people that have businesses here to have at least an opinion on this before we pull the plug on this or we make it a go. That's all.
Thank you.
Just
Councilor Golding?
Thank you, Mike. Just a quick follow-up for Jim.
Mhm.
Perhaps he could speak to the backyard trail
yeah.
idea. Is that something that you can share with us in your experience? What have you seen, or in other communities? How does it? My gut would say that it might have a positive impact on property values to be in close proximity to a trail like that. But then again, I don't know for sure. But if you could speak to how well received that's been in other communities, and then also whether there is a perceived value to having it adjacent to a residential property in the backyard like that.
So, council member, I was involved in building a trail in Sarasota County. If you've been down there, it's called the Legacy Trail. Was deeply involved. It was a former railroad corridor that was typically 100 feet wide, but sometimes down to about 60 or 70 feet wide. A lot of homes backed up to it, and the homeowners had worked their way into the right of way of the railroad, basically had mowed down into it. So this trail was a lot closer. The old tracks were a lot closer. Trains weren't using it, so it was just basically an empty corridor. And when the board there decided to put a trail in, we got a lot of that same concern of people are going to come into my backyard. People are, my green space behind my house is gone. And we almost went house by house and figured out the issues, trying to buffer that as best we could. Sometimes we were planting, sometimes we were fencing, sometimes we were putting stuff back. The trail opened, we paved it, we opened, the board moved forward with it, and sometimes we never solved the problems for the people. But what we found was within the first year of the trail being open, people were asking for gates to be installed in the fences that we installed to keep people out of backyards. The reason they wanted the gate was they wanted to get out on the trail from their yard. That's how they wanted to do it. The argument over value and how it affected the home value is kind of anecdotal, but we ran that trail, that railroad corridor went through, $1 million neighborhoods to, hundreds of $1,000 neighborhoods. I mean, big, beautiful homes, gated communities. And you can go down there now and look up on Zillow, and they will list in the sales ad located on the Legacy Trail, or backs up to the Legacy Trail, or next door to the Legacy Trail. So I think you list the amenities in your house, not necessarily the detriments, but it takes some time to get to that. I mean, it takes some people it takes the homeowners getting used to it. By and large, I think nationwide, these add value to the properties if they're done right. And doing them right means working with the individual property owners almost on a property by property basis.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Nichols?
I'm not opposed to moving forward with this and just doing more research, maybe some reach out to the residents and stuff, but it is current city right of way. And, we're going through this whole process, and we're reaching out to the public to get their input. So I just think we continue down that. I wouldn't stop right now with the potential of utilizing this, this area.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more hands raised from council. So Jim, I'd like to thank you and your staff for the presentation and the discussion tonight on the Urban Trails progress and some of the policy issues. Do you and your staff have the direction you think you need? Keep moving forward at this point?
Yes, we do, sir. And we'll see you probably in a few weeks.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you to Molly and Jason as well. That ends the 3 topics that we were going to cover tonight. We still have report outs. If any of the council members want to report out on anything that if had happened since the last briefing that they are responsible for. I'm not seeing any hands raised. How about any future briefing topics? Mayor Hoffman.
Sorry, Mike, I wasn't quick enough with the hand, but just to let everyone know that I talked about at the last briefing that we were going to do a separate series of interviews for the pension board nominees and include the pension board members. You got an email today with the invitation that included people that weren't pension board nominees. My thought is that they should just go into our later in the year interview cycle instead of just interviewing them now, especially if we've invited other pension board members to it. So just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. Okay, so we'll keep the other boards on the cycle that we've already established, and we'll pull pension board out to do those separately as we've previously discussed. Thank you.
Chris, have we mentioned this before? Have we thought about trying to change the cycle of the pension board? Because the first meeting after a new nomination, they are facing a lot of information that they are just not ready for at that meeting.
Yeah.
So shifting it.
I'm taking it one step at a time, but ultimately,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands raised, I'd like to thank you all for your time and participation tonight. Have a great rest of the evening.